something over 30 students as well. So I think, again, this goes back to the kind of the pie thing, where, there's this much funding for education, and we're all, like, trying to duke it out to get a larger piece of the pie, but unfortunately, right now, it's a zero-sum game, and it shouldn't be.
I'll be quick. I would say two things. One, from my experience in the classroom, and then in a leadership role as an academic coach, I think one of the biggest issues that's plaguing reform at the school level in terms of curriculum or any movement in that direction is this conflict between teaching as art and craft and teaching as best practice and research. I think there are definitely two schools of thought, and there's definitely a middle of the road, but I've taught with teachers who very strongly believe that this is my craft, it is my art. No matter what research you show me, I know what I'm doing, I've developed it over a long period of time, and they might be right, but that's ingrained in them. And then you have another cohort that thinks very strongly that there is a right way to do something, and that those ideas should be spread. So I think at the school level, that is a conflict, and very real conflict that I felt. And then in terms of transmission of research, I do think that teachers do see this kind of revolving door of, what's the next best thing? And you certainly hear from veteran teachers who've been in that, oh, we did that in the 80s, and that things come back around. And so I think that revolving door feeds the kind of unwillingness to buy into new reforms that otherwise I think would be very productive.
Yeah, at EdVestors we give away a prize every year that's a $100,000 prize to the most rapidly improving school, not the highest performing school. So we've been looking diligently, and each of those schools has been dramatically improving 50% faster than the district average over a 5-year period. So we have 5 years of history, all on schools that have been improving that long, going back to 2002. And recently we did a study where we looked at what was common across the schools. They included pilot schools, traditional district schools, there were some high schools. Dean Coleman has actually served on, or will be serving this year on a selection panel for the 2011 prize. And what was fascinating about the Ready Center's research findings is not what silver bullet or sort of fad reform or new piece of research, but the very common and consistent practices that all of the schools implemented. And it actually goes back to something that both Jessica and Paul referred to. So there was, first and foremost, deep teacher collaboration inside each of these schools. There was a sense of shared teacher ownership, but again, in very different schools with very different levels of autonomy and structure and governance. What they also had was leadership that was distributed leadership, where principals created space for the teachers to have ownership and voice in decision making. They all did use data very effectively to drive instruction, and they all mixed a high expectation culture, so the beliefs of the adults in what all of their students could do, with a high support environment for kids, so that there was these were schools, by the way, that had high percentages of English language learners, high percentages of students with special needs, as well as large numbers of children from low-income families. So they mixed a high support culture that included differentiated instruction, targeted interventions, and social emotional support. Every single school did those 4 things. They called it different things, they used different terms. So I think a lot of times we forget when we think about research and best practices that there's a real core set of effective practices, and some of the barriers are really, again, back to what both Jessica and Paul referred to, which is both deliberate time in the school day, in the schedule, for that work to happen. And then in an ideal world, as Meagan's organization is involved in, the teachers can not only work amongst themselves, but also take a look at other schools, often in the same city, dare I suggest, that are doing some of the things that they might want to adopt. And I know there's great national research, but there's also an awful lot happening right here that everyone can take advantage of.
I just want to take the opportunity to remind Laura that City on a Hill for the last 3 years has had some of the highest value add of any school in the state, and I believe we've applied in the past. And then you make it, I'd love to talk more about that. But just quick thing to add is also at our school, City on a Hill, remember we talked about the 1-year contracts? Charter schools also have a 5-year contract with the state. And they can be closed in 5 years. What happens mostly when schools struggle is you fire the principal. If you fire the principal and you continue on, you're not going to change much in the building. And then number 2 is that our charter, we have 280 students we're chartered for, and we get $14,000 per student. That's it. That's what we get. And then we raise money on top of that. We raise about a couple $100,000 on top of that. It's very hard to do that. 2 people raise about $200,000. It's very difficult. We can now choose to do whatever we want with that money. Our teachers have not chosen to go down to class sizes of 15. Our teachers have chosen to have classes at our school of 22 to 25, but use the rest of the money to have our 6 special ed teachers, our 2 college counselors, our coaches, our 2 athletic coaches. We've won state track and state basketball and city cheerleading 3 years in a row now, and our ELL full-time coordinator. So we could tomorrow reduce our number of students in the classroom, but then we'd need more adults, and then our salary would decrease. So we get a set amount of money, and our teachers are empowered to decide how to divvy up that pie. So for us, it's not about how many kids are in our classroom, because we have total power of how to decide that. And so the last little characteristic thing that we use to evaluate our school every year is every fall, we do a survey for all our parents. We have over 75% anonymous survey return. It's in English and Spanish and Haitian Creole. And this last year, we had our highest number of families put the numbers in a lottery. Remember, it's a lottery. It's a blind lottery. There's no weighting of anything. I can't lose the ELL applications. I can't lose the IEP applications. All the students are put in, and the names are pulled by a retired federal judge. He pulls them out, and they're published right there in front of an audience of families, just like in Waiting for Superman. I don't invite families to our lottery. I do not, because it's a horrible experience for us, because I only have 80 spots, and I had 840 families apply for the 80 spots. And when we survey our families who all come in, when we survey them, and I have over 25% of my incoming 80 families have IEPs this year, 25%. I surveyed them and asked them, why is it you chose City on a Hill? And there's open responses and there's multiple choice. And we have 100% placement of all students in college since 1998, and they don't say that. They don't say because no student has ever failed the MCAS. They don't say because of our high GPA and the fact that last year we got our first student into an Ivy League school. They say the reason they chose to send their kids to City on a Hill Charter Public School in Roxbury, 2 blocks from Dublin, is because it's small and safe. That's the reason they all say it, and they've been saying it now for 8 years straight, consistently. All the other answers are statistically insignificant. They're all in 2 and 3%, but that one's over 50% is the reason they put, and that's including open responses. I think that's very telling about what they're looking for in our education.
Charlie?
It's a great question about why reform doesn't get implemented and shared, and I have to think that it goes back to the issue of resources. Clearly, resources aren't the only answer, but they're the elephant in the room that no one really wants to talk about too much. For example, you want to get a teacher out of a school for a day to visit another school, you got to get a sub. That costs money. And every reform that I can remember being the beneficiary of has never gone very far because the resources are pulled out of it, just as it's beginning, or it's under-resourced from the very beginning. And then that's why the next reform comes in, because no one is serious enough about providing the resource. And I don't mean just money. I mean people tasked with making sure that it gets implemented. And the flip side, I was thinking in terms of your experience with the charter school, you can always find some teachers who will volunteer to work more days a week and more days in the summer for less money. You'll always find that. Now you scale up and you ask the profession whether it's willing to do more for less. What profession is going to do that? You ask lawyers to do that, you ask doctors to do that. I never met a school board that didn't try to find some way to get teachers to do more for less. That's how old I am.
Well, we are out of time, but I want to start by thanking our panelists for being involved. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you all for coming, and one of the reasons we wanted to start having these fall convocations is to remember that as we go to our classes, as we prepare in our own area, one of the things that as educators we need to constantly work on is when to get to come together as a community and discuss these very difficult issues and find common solutions. So thank you for coming and have a very great year.